this game.
Elden Ring is a big old beefy game. Tree. So much to do, so much to see, so many ways to get smushed into paste. Look at tree, point at dog. The possibilities are finite. But there's just so many finite things. There's so much, in fact, that at however many hours I'm currently at on my main file, I still haven't finished Elden Ring, but I decided to take a break from placing skull icons on the map to talk a little about it. There are some real neat bits of design in this game that I worry might get overshadowed by the world, the bosses, the epic moments and encounters. So I'm not gonna get into bosses or specific locations or NPCs or lore or whatever. I'm gonna mostly focus on the design and systems in the game, the things that I believe are contributing to how enjoyable I've found this experience to be. And because this video isn't about specific sections of the game, I've done my best to make this video as spoiler-free as possible. So as long as you're okay hearing about how some things work and are fine with seeing stuff in this starting-ish area of the map, we should be good. Listen, I'm not even done with the game yet. The last thing I want to do is spoil some of the cool stuff in here, which is why I'm also going to ask any commenters to follow my lead. I'm really excited to hear what people are enjoying as well as the stuff that isn't quite clicking, but if you want to go into specifics, please drop a big ol' spoilers at the top. Anyway, let's rock! Here's a quick breakdown of game design bits and bobs in Elden Ring, what I think are neat, in no particular order. The map. Starting off with a big one. First of all, can I just say I'm so happy this game even has a map? I get so turned around in other From Software games, which I know is partially by design, but man, just knowing where you are in relation to other things takes such a mental load off my plate. But here's the thing, you still need to build that mental map for the smaller scale locations like dungeons and castles. The map rides this fine line between being accurate and artistic, where it ends up becoming more of a reference to occasionally check than a tool you frequently use. You pop open the map, take note of some of the larger formations and structures, and figure out what you want to do. Or you see something neat in the distance and use the map to determine a rough plan of attack. As you play, you might come to recognize certain footprints as belonging to certain types of buildings, but not every man-made object is even on the map, while things like paths are way more obvious sketched onto canvas than they are in the actual world. The majority of your navigation is done via the world itself, which is absolutely my preferred way to explore an open world environment. You don't have dozens of UI elements obscuring your view, pointing out where you should go. You don't have a mini-map in the corner that's far more useful for navigating, so you only stare at that little corner while you're getting from point A to point B. The closest thing Elden Ring has to navigational aids are the beacons you can place that show up as pillars of light, a la Breath of the Wild, and markers you can put down that only show up on your compass, and even then they only appear when you're already practically on top of it. Most of the time I use the compass as a compass. I honestly don't remember the last time I wanted to know my east from west so badly outside Sea of Thieves. The only navigational aids you have in the game are the ones you make yourself. The world is so dense with content that almost any direction you choose to go in will have you stumble upon something before long, meaning one of the more difficult tasks later in the game is figuring out where you haven't been yet. I missed a significant chunk of early game content because I rode past a tree line instead of venturing through it. Most open world games go out of their way to reveal all their content, giving you lists of things to do and side content to experience. Elden Ring feels like a game that's mostly indifferent towards the player, presenting its world and stepping back. The last time I felt this way towards an open world game was Breath of the Wild, a game that points you at an end goal and says, what do you want to do until then? A recurring point of criticism I've seen towards Breath of the Wild comes from people who found it to be lacking in meaningful rewards, while people like me either found the goodies fine on their own, or the path to the thing was reward enough. A classic journey versus destination situation, or perhaps intrinsic versus extrinsic rewards if you prefer. But Elden Ring provides both in spades, to the extent that the only times I feel remotely unsatisfied are when I get a thing that doesn't mesh with my current character build. Another incantation? Really? Which leads me to my last point about the map. It expands as you uncover more terrain. So at the start of the game, the scope is reined in. It keeps you focused on your immediate surroundings. You have no sense for how big the game world is, other than looking out into the distance and wondering if those far-off structures are part of the game or just set dressing. But the map zooming out bit by bit as you venture past the edges of your map is excellent. Many open world games just show you the whole map from the get-go, maybe gray it out or obscure it with fog. But here, we get both. Once you reach the edge of your map, you have fog that you cut into as you explore, giving you a general impression of where you've been without showing too much. There's just so much unknown waiting out there for you to discover, and not even knowing where the edges of the map are is extremely compelling for a game of this scale. The map reinforces the type of open world game this is. A game where you're intended to forge your own path, go somewhere simply because it looks like there might be something there. You can opt into a few systems to provide greater direction, but you're rarely explicitly told where to go or what to do. The map can become your guide through this world, but less as a strategy guide and more as a guy over your shoulder telling you what he remembers. Some things are sharp, while other details are fuzzy. Oh, and having a huge honkin' tree in the distance to orient yourself is pretty handy. Oh, these particles are the tree's leaves. That took me a while to realize. I do wish the markers were different colors, though. This would make me happy, even if it does look like I spilled M&Ms all over the map. Oh, and being able to tab between your markers the way you can with Sites of Grace would be nice too. Speaking of which, Sites of Grace. I love the amount of convenience they packed into these souped-up bonfires. They become a one-stop shop for almost anything you want to do outside of upgrading your weapons. It's excellent. Probably doesn't need to be said, but Elden Ring is a difficult game, so it's great to see so many areas outside of combat where things are streamlined, tilted towards player convenience. You get the sense they want you to be fighting bosses, not the menus, though they can be a bit inscrutable on occasion. Additionally, the fact that any Site of Grace becomes a fast travel location adds an extra incentive to find as many as possible, which is no small feat. They can be surprisingly difficult to spot sometimes. I'm genuinely impressed with how well the developers at From Software were able to hide giant glowing blobs of light. But one of my favorite parts of the Sites of Grace from the big picture design perspective are the glowing wispy trails at some of them that point towards a major location. This is as close as the game ever gets to a main quest log saying, here's where you should go. Unless you've been paying enough attention to understand what the NPCs are rattling on about. These are great for two distinct types of players. One, for players who are either less experienced or simply prefer to follow the critical path. They keep you focused. If you follow their lines long enough, you are guaranteed something big and important. Some might not want to spend a few hours stumbling through the woods or awkwardly maneuvering their horse on some geometry that may or may not be intended, and that's fair. Those players are wrong, of course. This is definitely intended, but I'm always a fan of supporting differing playstyles in a game this open. The other type of player is someone who does not want to follow the critical path and deliberately wants to do everything else before doing what you're supposed to do. You can literally spend dozens of hours in this game before ever getting near the probably intended first dungeon, and the game endorses that with open arms. If anything, it's facilitated because you know you're opting into optional content. Think of all the times you're playing a game and you sniff out the path forward just so you can double back and check out all the dead ends. It's that, but with a giant arrow telling you where to avoid until you're ready to do that thing. All this plays into the fact that Elden Ring is a big open game. One of the strongest aspects of its design is the fact that you're never railroaded into a forced encounter. Presumably the final boss is the exception. I haven't gotten there yet, but up to that point, you always have the option to leave and do something else if you're having a rough time somewhere. The Sites of Grace facilitate this. They're your base camps as you chart the unknown, and the Rays of Grace serve as a beacon for where you might want to go eventually. Though it would be nice if the rays disappeared from your map once you took out the boss or whatever they're pointing to, but that's a minor thing. Next up, Flasks! You can get ye Flask. I was playing a bit of the Demon's Souls remake before Elden Ring dropped, and man, I sure don't miss consumable healing items. The rechargeable flask system is easily my favorite for these Soulsborne, whatever we're calling this genre, games. At any time, you can rest at a Site of Grace and get all of your healing flasks back for free. Part of why I never quite got into Bloodborne and eventually had to be carried through it by friends was because the blood vial system feels punishing when you're still learning the game. Same in Demon's Souls, where you have to play this metagame with yourself. Is it really worth it to use this rare healing item, or should I try to use several smaller healing— oh, I'm dead. It's the problem in oh so many RPGs, where you end up stockpiling an inventory's worth of full heals and revives because you're never quite sure if it's the right time to use them. Rechargeable flasks give you the freedom as an inexperienced player to dip a toe into dangerous waters and not lose resources in the process. As long as you didn't die with a million runes out there, but that's on you. What's really clever in Elden Ring is how they wove this system into the open world. You might be traveling long distances with no grace in sight, or fighting through massive castles without many shortcuts. The first bit of help comes in the form of these red and blue scarabs that replenish a health or mana flask when defeated. Is it mana? Is it mana or is it mana?
Mana.
Mana. That sounds fancier. They're scattered throughout the game, usually precariously near the edge of a cliff, but it's a great way to top off while you're out in the field. They aren't extremely common, but they always appear in the same place, so they can become a reliable extra flask in some situations. The other system that I adore gives you a couple flasks back after you completely wipe out a group of enemies. I do have a few problems with this system. For one, there's no visual indicator of what the game considers a group, so sometimes you take out a bunch of enemies and don't get any flasks back. At other times you get a recharge in the middle of a battle because I guess these 3 dudes counted as a group. It ends up feeling very inconsistent and you can't really plan for it unless you've already run through this batch of enemies. Also, the game tells you up front that different groups will recharge different numbers of flasks, but unless you're keeping a mental count of where you're at, there's no way to know how many flasks you got back. Kinda wish there was just a little +2 +1 in the corner or something. Oh, and if all your flasks are full and you take out a group, you don't get anything. It should just fill you up like half a flask's worth. Nitpicks notwithstanding, this system is so good. It keeps you out exploring for longer stretches of time, and it rewards you for taking out groups of enemies, for opting into conflict. Because hey, guess what? This game isn't all castles and trenches. The developers can't always force you into engagements when you're on a horse in a field. There's an idea in game design that if you let them, most players will optimize the fun out of a game. You'll find a strategy that works and then do that for hours on end because slow, monotonous success is often more important than variety and riskier strategies. You know, fun. I'm guilty of that myself in countless games, and whenever I see incentives to take on that extra bit of risk, engaging with the game rather than avoiding everything, I'm all in. Also, for my money, this is a better version of Bloodborne's attack to get some of your health back system. Yes, I know, they're going for completely different experiences, but that system is excellent once you're already good at the game, while it's brutal for less skilled players. Like me. I find that this group recharge system in Elden Ring, at least theoretically, creates a compelling risk versus reward for players of all skill levels. There have absolutely been situations where I'm low on heals, considering running back to a site of grace, and instead try to take out a group of enemies to get some flasks back. Or the times where I find a new site of grace but decide not to rest at it because I'd rather press onward and go for some flask drops than respawn all the enemies I've killed. That kind of on-the-fly risk assessment is my jam. Alright, next is Traversal! Free, abundant fast travel equals good. Horse that can double jump, excellent. Some open world games go for a more realistic approach, where you can call for your horse and watch it saunter over to you for half an hour. Other games just teleport your horse behind you when you whistle, which is objectively better. Elden Ring wins the award for Best Open World Horse because it pops up out of the ground beneath your feet. Bless you, Torrent! A massive pet peeve of mine is stamina in open world games. Honestly, I could probably make an entire video just about stamina in games, open world and otherwise, because I find it usually places a frustrating restriction on the player rather than being a resource you need to actively consider and work with. Getting tired after running for 15 seconds because something realism? No thank you. From Software's games largely get a pass because their stamina systems tend to be interwoven into the combat, making it feel closer to a tabletop RPG, where you have a certain amount of actions you can perform before the end of your turn. Do you want to commit to that extra swing, leaving you without enough stamina to dodge away? But the stamina can be egregious when you're sprinting through an area for the 20th time just to take another stab at a boss. Pun intended. In Elden Ring, you usually have a site of grace close to the boss, but more importantly, you don't consume stamina outside of combat. Yes, thank you. Does it make sense? No, not really. Is it good game design? Yes. If it's irrelevant outside of combat, don't make me think about it, much in the same way the UI fades out while you're out exploring but can be brought back with a single button press. They want you to focus on what matters in that moment and respect that the player has different values when they're riding a horse over a mountain than when they're poking a troll with a stick. Another point in the convenience column. Last point for traversal is the Stakes of Marika. Marika? I don't remember. They blend into the scenery and I often don't even notice they're there, but it doesn't matter. If you're near one, this icon appears in the top left corner of the screen next to your dozen other icons, and if you then die, you can choose to respawn at the statue instead of at your last site of grace as usual. They're the best. I could see the developers being tempted to add some sort of cost onto the player, like respawn at the statue at the cost of some of your runes, or there being a limited consumable that lets you use them or something. Nope. Die near one, you can get plonked right back there. You do lose the benefits of being at a site of grace, meaning you can't access your storage or things like that, but otherwise the statues streamline the experience, keeping you focused on the task at hand. Big fan. Except for when you feel like there should be one, but there isn't. It definitely can feel a bit arbitrary. Like the group flask refills, it typically isn't something you can plan for until you're familiar with the area or just see it pop up. But on the flip side, seeing a Stake of Marika lets you know you're in for a fun time up ahead. But do you know what might keep you alive in that boss encounter a few seconds longer? Crafting. Crafting is a staple of open world games. Why? Cynically, because it gives a purpose to all that wide open terrain, separating the more, shall we say, content-rich locales. Slap down a couple of herbs and bam! Now there's a reason for this plateau to exist. That is still the case here, although it is shocking just how little of the world I've seen so far feels barren. There is so much. Why am I making this video when I could be playing more Elden Ring? Yeah! The crafting system in Elden Ring is pretty much entirely optional, and that's a good thing. I didn't really craft anything for the first couple dozen hours, partially because I didn't see the value in a lot of what I could make, and I had little sense for which resources were rarer than others. Should I turn this magic poo into an ointment, or should I wait just in case there's a better thing I can use the poo for later? There are a couple things Elden Ring does right. Picking up crafting resources is instant. You can ride on horseback and mash the grab button and slurp everything into your bottomless pockets. Any excess goes straight into your storage. There are no bag upgrades you need to hold more boar pelts. Just grab everything and worry about it later. And then when you do get around to crafting, you might notice something. Most of what you can make deals with status effects like poison or bleeding. You can't craft healing items. Well, you can heal Torrent, which you should do all the time. He's a good boy. But no healing items for you, which means at no point in the game do you need to stop and grind for ingredients before venturing out into a new area. You might still choose to grind for some materials at some point, but it's likely to be for some ancillary, less critical effect. Your armor, weapons, talismans, and consumables are all distinct in purpose, with only the occasional overlap. This makes it easier for your brain to categorize the 50 billion things in this game. Most of the craftable items net you a temporary buff or deal a specific type of damage. Maybe you die to a boss and then realize a certain craftable might come in handy. Nyeh. Other times it means scoping out a group of enemies and assuming they'll deal a certain type of damage you'll want to mitigate. It's bonus time! As long as you aren't in combat, you can hop into a bush, whip a little something up, and pop back out. You don't have to go back to a site of grace and fiddle with your inventory. There isn't an NPC, a crafting Christopher you need to check in with just to make a new set of arrows. You can craft what you need when you need it. The cherry on top, and it's a big cherry, is that you learn new crafting recipes over the course of the game. The recipe books gradually expand your options while you gain access to new resources across the map. And some of the more useful craftables require pots and other containers, adding yet another category of meaningful rewards that are scattered throughout the world. Your options and possibilities expand bit by bit as you explore. The crafting system is supplemental to the core experience. It's there if you want it, but stays out of your way if you don't. Resources are plentiful, varied, and don't take up much real estate in your brain, and you can quickly slap some items together when you think you might need them. I've taken out many soul-crushing bosses, only to realize after the fact, hey, that probably would have been a bit easier if I used some blank beforehand. There are rarely right or wrong answers, just, do you want this to hurt slightly less? And speaking of pain, combat! I honestly don't have that much to say about the combat. I've finished Dark Souls 3 and Sekiro. Was carried through Bloodborne on a Yarnum tour bus. And played a good chunk of the Demon's Souls remake. Beware of dragons ahead.
No,
don't worry about
I'm
that.
gonna vote that down. Foul.
There's some burnt bodies here.
No,
Seems
don't,
like there
listen.
might be
No.
dragons.
Have you
No.
ever seen a dragon in a Souls game? Nary the two shall meet, is what I say.
Nary
Yeah, see, that's a wyvern. It's not a dragon.
I've played my fair share, but I'm not the biggest hardcore From Software veteran. People way smarter than me will be able to break down the combat in more detail. The various types of armaments, what's overpowered, and what needs a buff. I started my main file with the Prisoner, and have mostly been rocking long swords and sorceries the whole game and having a blast. I just went with the Vagabond for all this game footage you're looking at because it looks better than... What I can say, as someone who loves to cower behind a shield, is that guard counters are an excellent addition, backstabbing and critical hits feel more reliable to pull off than in previous games, though I do miss the giant red dot of death from Sekiro, and I'm as bad at parrying as ever. If anything, I'm mostly just amazed, without getting into specifics, so please enjoy some irrelevant footage, by how many new toys and systems they dole out over the course of the game. And due to the non-linear structure and huge tracts of land, you might gain access to a whole new system with tons of features like dozens of hours into the game. Some of my friends missed some pretty dang essential stuff early on because they, walked in a different direction. I'm sure my take would be different if that had happened to me, because when I'm 20 hours in and gain access to an entire new sub-menu, I'm just impressed and flabbergasted. But maybe the biggest point of note is actually how much combat you can avoid. Running past enemies is nothing new to these games, but it's never been easier to sneak past enemy lines if you're patient and observant. If you so choose, you can push much deeper into high-level areas than if you fought your way through. If Elden Ring gated every zone with a boss you had to defeat in order to proceed, we'd probably be seeing a lot more in common between everyone's playthroughs. As it stands, players who want to ride out and see how far they can get will be going for quite a while before they hit a wall, and then they can go back and fight all those enemies they skipped when they feel up to it. In my humble opinion, this is the gold standard for open world game design. It often feels like a waste to me when a massive, gorgeous world is handcrafted for players to run through, but then everyone has the exact same experience down to what you do where and in what order. You get things like optional side quests, which, while better than nothing, don't do much to meaningfully diverge from the set path. Not saying these games are bad, far from it, but I don't really consider them open world games. They're more like large hub games, where you have room to run around in, but it still feels like 95% of the game is the same from one player to the next. The type of freeform design present in games like Elden Ring appeals to multiple kinds of players. It lets them experiment and seamlessly flow between different types of experiences. Richard Bartle's taxonomy of player types breaks down 4 rough approximations of play styles. Killers that look for competition with other players, achievers who pursue progress in a game and explicit rewards, explorers who seek knowledge of a game's world, its story, how it works, and socializers who enjoy social interaction with other players and NPCs. Not every game can or even should appeal to every type, and you might occupy every square or a different square depending on the game, or moment to moment within just that one game. Also, it's important to note Bartle originally developed this idea in the context of MUDs, which if you're unfamiliar, you can think of as early text-based MMOs. But I like it as a starting point when thinking of the different types of experiences players might be looking for when they start any game. And would you look at that? A game like Dark Souls and, Elden Ring really speaks to each of these player types in certain specific ways. Maybe that's part of why this game is so satisfying for so many. Wait, what about socializers?
Messages.
The final bit and/or bob I want to discuss is the in-game messaging system. This was established back in 2009's Demon's Souls and has shown up in pretty much every game helmed by Hidetaka Miyazaki since. At any point in the world, you're able to plonk down a message comprised of phrases and words picked from a list, and there's a chance for that message to appear in other players' games. If you're connected to the internet, you'll be practically tripping over messages warning of upcoming hazards, lying about secrets, and making repetitive, predictable jokes that still somehow manage to make me laugh. What's fascinating is how good these messages are in an open world game. It's like they were always meant to belong in a world this large. Sometimes they feel like a crowdsourced version of the grace beams, pointing in the general direction of objectives, caves, and secrets. Earlier, when I talked about being rewarded for your curiosity, Oftentimes there isn't anything around that corner or down that suspicious hallway, but thanks to the message system, you're likely to find someone bemoaning the dead end, with dozens of likes. It not only gives me a feeling of connection to other players that I never quite got playing other From Software games, but for someone like me, a message is in fact a pretty decent substitute for an actual reward. Sniffing out a weird spot of the world and seeing that many others did the same, and now we're all bummed there's nothing here, hasn't stopped being amusing to me. I've placed a bunch of messages myself over the course of my playthrough, pinning the ones that get any significant number of appraisals so I don't accidentally delete them. Boy, the 10 slots you get fill up quick. I have no idea how they determine which messages show up for which players, but it's great that my advice and warnings get completely ignored while complaining about something after it's already happened, or pointing at a thing and saying what it is leaves me inundated with high fives and thumbs ups. We all share one brain cell, and the only word it knows is dog. Conclusion ahead. So that's where I'm at on Elden Ring right now. As I said, I still have plenty left to do, and I'm curious if any of how I feel right now will change by the end. Once I'm all done, I plan to do a spoiler-filled Elden Ring discussion stream, so make sure you slap me a follow on the old Twitch website to see when that happens in like a month or two, probably. I'm loving Elden Ring so far and wanted to highlight some of the clever design decisions rolling around in there. They managed to craft a game with an absurd abundance of places to go, trinkets to find, and things to poke, all while removing much of the friction present in earlier From games, and the friction present in plenty of other open world games. They didn't just make Dark Souls but bigger. I get the sense they really examined the formula they've honed over the years and looked at ways to streamline and simplify where they could, without limiting the player's options. The game will repeatedly inform you of your untimely demise, but there's always somewhere else you can go, some other adventure around the bend. I'm looking forward to hearing how everyone feels about Elden Ring, especially once I finally finish the game. I'm almost there, I'm close. Oh, and again, spoiler tags for spoilery comments. Thank you. That's all for me, folks. Now I'm gonna get back to playing Elden Ring. What? I had to stop playing it for like days to get this video done. I don't even remember what I was doing. Please help, everything is a dog now. Is this a dog? Apparently. That a dog? Yes! Rise now, ye doggos, ye pups who yet bark. The call of long-lost walkies speaks to us all. Poochie Lou, chieftain of the dog park. The ever-brilliant Gold Snoot. Thea, the nap-bed companion. The loathsome dung-eater. And Sir Gideon Arfnir, the all-knowing. And you're a dog. Everything's a dog. Subscribe if you want. I don't upload often, but mashing the subscribe button makes me work faster. And the bell lets me know when dinner's ready. See you for my next video in 3 years. Farewell.